Welcome back to Trailmakers with Fenrir. Today I'm here to introduce you to Fenrir's Airforce, dedicated PlayStation servers with a consistent rule set where you can come and earn some of the best jets that I've made over my 4,000 plus hours of Trailmakers. Right now, the tech tree has over 30 planes available, with 2 starting options, and everything from the basic Mark 13 M10 Midnight to logic-packed fancy systems like the 14D13 Black Cat, and many more, some of which I'll demonstrate here in this video for you. So I'll start off with the rules and regulations, because we only have a couple of them. We have a few solid bans and a couple of limitations that can vary from instance to instance of the server, but we'll start with the solid bans. Gyros are always banned. There are just a couple of jets that might be available as special rewards that use gyros, but they won't be available to earn any further ones. There'll be special use cases only for use in the wild. The next ban is quantum rudders, which is because of a speed glitch involved for the high torque near instant acceleration engines, which are just generally unfair, overpowered, and cheesy. We have anchor pins banned because it's an Airforce server. If you're gluing yourself to the ground, it's not really anything part of an Airforce, so that one's banned. It's also used to make very overpowered armor sometimes, so although that takes engineering, it's also banned. Hover blocks are banned because of the UFO engine glitch, which similarly has really high acceleration, power rate ratios, and other qualities that make it unfair. And the other hard bans are in the weapons category. We have both flat cannons are hard banned. They're never allowed mainly because of the range. If they didn't have twice the range of other lock-on weapons, I might allow them in a limited capacity, but as they stand, no flat cannons. And the final hard ban is no EMPs, because they're both overpowered for their ability to stun lock opponents, and because of the logic that many of my builds use makes them even more powerful on my servers. So, no EMPs, ever. On the other hand, the limited blocks can be adjusted up or down, sometimes to great degrees, but I'm going to have them at their standard amounts for this video. Normally I'll have 2 gyro stabilizers allowed for payloads or custom floating aircraft, stabilization systems for VTOLs, etc. And like any of the limited ones, if you ask nicely, I will adjust them up or down if you need them for your builds, because Fenrir's Airforce, you are allowed to use builds that you've either made from scratch or adjusted from my builds. It's just that in order to earn further planes, you'll have to use stock models. But continuing on from that tangent, we already covered that. We have limited detachable blocks, which the standard amount is also 2. Now, this does allow for a little bit of the zero drag glitch to be done, but it has to be done efficiently. So if you know what you're doing with the zero drag glitch, you should be able to do it without too much issue. Maybe a little bit more complexity use than you normally would have, but it's also more lag efficient to use less detachable blocks. If you have 100 plus pieces popping off of your creation every time it spawns in, it'll create a large lag spike, and that's unpleasant. So this is more of a quality of life thing. It also allows for up to 2 custom payloads, such as bombs or missiles, because Fenrir's Airforce, at least in the later tiers, has a couple of RC missiles available. And then finally, for weapon limitations, we have smart cannons limited, miniguns limited, and rockets limited, because they have good auto aim and high power, and their limits are normally set to slightly above the quote-unquote standard of my planes. So you'll be able to use typically a maximum of 8 smart cannons, 6 miniguns, and/or 4 rockets. And you also have 2 blasters available if you prefer high caliber stuff or have aquatic underwater builds, things like that. We also have a limit of 2 of each shield projector type, because spamming them is just unpleasant. We have a limit of 8 bomb bays, mostly for lag control. Because it's an Airforce, if you're trying to hit people out of the air with a spray of bombs, you're mostly going to be causing lag rather than damage, so that's a quality of life for the server. And then similarly, we have 20 dynamite, because the missiles use 6 to 8 apiece, but I leave a little bit extra for other people's custom builds and alterations. The limit is there mostly for lag spikes, because if you need over 20 pieces of dynamite to get the job done, you're not killing the build, you're killing the server. Energy blades are not limited because they have very high complexity and are honestly too fun to limit. Guns with little to no auto-aim are not limited because they'll take an insane amount of skill to shoot down any of my jets, so it'll be worth points to you if you use something like that effectively. And yeah, that might do it for the restrictions category. Occasional restrictions for the tighter servers will also disable helicopter engines, which is for people who use them in the manner of gyros. And powered tail fins will also be disabled once in a while for the more restricted ones. Just because if you load a plane with like half a dozen powered tail fins for each of your control surfaces, you can do some pretty unnatural things. But that's not something you see very often these days, so that's not within the typical ban limits, and I place that more within creative freedom. Anyways, moving on. Next up, I'll talk a little bit about the tech tree that I've devised, how it works, and how you earn your planes. There are 2 starting options that work a little bit like the reserve options in War Thunder. They're available to anyone who joins the server. Both of them are from the start. And we have the straightforward one, the Mark 13 M10 Midnight, the standard version of it anyways. There's an entire line of these things. And then to start off the more variety packed line directly, we have the Copperhead, the Mark 15M, which is both a blade jet and a VTOL. I don't know if I'll be able to put a visual on screen in any significant manner, but the tech tree with these 2 starting points has 3 main branches that kind of intersect and weave. If you start off with the Mark 13 M10, well, I say if you start off, when you start off with the Mark 13 M10, you can begin earning the variants of the M series, which includes everything from amphibious to logic systems to autopilots, missiles, etc. But at tier 3 of that, you're able to branch off into the other tiers, which includes skipping into the various named ones with higher powered logic and higher powered firepower. I'm going to just leave that in there, that's funny. But yes, the variants with higher firepower and crazier logic. And then also, it'll get you into halfway through the blade jet tier if you get the tier 3 M series blade jet. Goodness, I'm stumbling over my own words. I've made a lot of planes. Just for instance, here's the production model folder. Not all of these are in the tech tree. Some of them are outdated models that I decided not to include yet. But we've got quite a list in here, and a bunch more that don't have their descriptions and finalizations yet because you can only earn 1 plane per day. So I have a couple of days to finish polishing out the Airforce before anyone gets to the top tier things, even if they really want to grind at them. But I'm getting off on a tangent. What's next? So because it's far easier to use, you'll most likely be starting out with the Kitten Jet Mark 13 M10 Midnight. Now this has been featured in a number of my videos over the past year because, well, this particular version is over a year old if I'm not mistaken. But don't let that put you down, it's still a very capable airframe. if we go into sticky mode here, you can see that once I've let off the controls and I'm only pressing throttle, we don't pitch up or pitch down in any noteworthy fashion, and our roll is obviously very stable as well. So we hold our angle of attack incredibly well, without any form of autopilot or logic stabilization, auto reaction systems, or anything like that. Just the sheer physicality of the build, which is why I decided to make this the standard model. It's easy to use, easy to modify, has a lot of spare complexity for its variations, and is generally very well-rounded in combat. It's also got the quote-unquote standard firepower, which is actually on the higher side of what's available in my Airforce. So it has 6 smart cannons with no variable firepower. They all run at full speed, as well as 2 rockets. Now, in place of logic systems, this does have a couple of bells and whistles just for fun. It has flares, pretend chaff, the fireworks. We have the meow sound effect, which is standard on all of the planes, and used for anything from a crash alarm to like beeping at people as you're about to fly by them, and smoke trails. Now all of these functions are on the D-pad, and in later versions they're replaced with the special functionalities on logic. But we also, on all of these planes, have a simple air brake feature. If I get back into some sticky mode here, where if you yaw in both directions at once, instead of returning the tail to a neutral position, it spreads the tail open and gives a significant amount of drag to slow you down. So from the very start, you have some interesting options just in this one plane. And I'll probably show a couple of the variants in this video as well, depending on the time. But first I'm going to show the other starter vehicle, which, as I mentioned, is more challenging to use, but gets you into the more interesting vehicles a little bit quicker. This here is the Copperhead, which was made specifically once I had decided on Airforce, so it's not necessarily up to snuff in some categories. It's a little bit more challenging to use and quote-unquote grind with to get new vehicles, but once you get past it, it'll go quickly, trust me. The blade jets, they get spicy fast. But aside from being a blade jet, this is also a VTOL. So we have vertical takeoff and landing capabilities, although due to its small size and blades and everything like that, it is a little bit sluggish to rise. It also has a significant amount of armor for its size, which weighs it down, but that helps for being a little more forgiving in combat as a new build. They can take a bit more of a beating. Now there's no variable systems, so your handling is what you get, and the firepower is also what you get. There's two pairs of smart cannons and 1 pair of rockets. And then let's go into forward mode. You can see, unlike the M10 or the M13, the Mark 13 M10, numbers and letters, this one does not hold its pitch and roll very well in forward flight. You'll have to manage it a lot better, and therefore, especially if there's any lag going on, it's more challenging to fly. However, the firepower is not much less, the armor is much higher, and then you have the blades as well. So you should still be able to rack up some, advancement's not entirely kill-based. I've yet to decide on the criteria for exactly earning new builds. Right now you just have to do well, impress me, and seem to enjoy the build, and I'll begin to upgrade you. Now speaking of upgrades, let's see a couple of the variants that you'll be able to earn early on. So you've seen standard Mark 13 M10, which has a nice little blurb of text attached to it. But if we go down here, we can grab the M9, which is the amphibious version. You can see we have, if I look at it from a different angle, we have the underwater bubble cockpit piston glitched in instead, as well as various propellers jammed in across the build. Now this is the earlier of the two amphibious versions, so it has no additional armor. In fact, it has less armor than the standard version, being that it is the previous model. I didn't armor up until the M10, I believe. That's... oops. Okay, there is a hint of armor on it, but nothing significant. It might have only been there to get the piston glitch to behave. But if we go ahead and take this for a spin, you'll see that we've got seamless transition in and out of the water, although we are much slower in the water. We're equipped with a pair of blasters, which is about the same amount of firepower as the standard 6 smart cannons. It's slightly less, it's about 5 worth. But because they work underwater, it's perfect for this build. And it's also swapped the rockets for the auto-aiming torpedoes. So you've lost a little bit of above-water firepower as well in this variant. But the ability to hide underwater from enemy bullets and emerge at your will to re-engage is pretty useful. Not to mention, it can just be fun to be able to dive for a while. Next, we'll see... what's next? Where's the M13? Yep, next I'll show you Mark 13 M13, which is the Tier 2 with the logic option. I've kind of split up the M series into its own mini tier line. There's branches and branches. So the first of the logic section has limited fuel and ammo. It'll have 12 pairs of rockets, 50 seconds of gunfire, and about 8 minutes worth of fuel if you're using it at full throttle. It recharges on the ground. I'll start loading in while I'm reading this out to you. And I should mention this, that it's only a general suggestion, not a hard rule, but in my servers I prefer if you don't air repair. I'd prefer if you fight to the death and respawn when needed. But that's especially true of using the limited fuel and ammo versions, because if you air repair, it resets the system and there's not really any point in using it. So if you're going to use the fancy logic version, start getting used to no air repairs. But aside from that, we can stop looking at the description and look more at the plane itself. It has a hint more armor than the earlier version. We've got some on the side pieces here to keep the wings from falling off as often, as well as just a couple on the bottom here. Now I can't remember if it was the piston which holding me back, or if it was just I didn't want to add too much weight and drag, because the more armor these have, the slower they get, unfortunately. And that's the trade-off. And yeah, I'll pull this one out of build mode. And we've got, we can't see because of the sun. We have indicators on the front and the rear. So whether you use the cockpit camera or behind the seat camera like I prefer, you can see all your counters. And it won't do anything while we're on the carrier because it'll instantly reload. But you can see that the lower numbers are fuel percentage beginning to go down. If we begin to fire our guns, it starts to lower our ammo count, and then anytime we fire the rockets, it drops it by 1. And then when any of those run out, it'll disable the associated systems, and if I'm not mistaken, there should be warning sounds. I don't think there's warning lights on this version, but there should be warning sounds if any of the systems are running low. Let's test that by running the rockets out, because they're the fastest. I can just click them whether they're reloaded or not. Yes, okay. So it varies from system to system what I've got it set at, but when it starts to get low, it'll begin to beep. And I believe the speed of the beeping depends on which system it is. So if you enjoy this particular plane, you'll get used to which ones do which and just be able to play it by sound. And then, in order to reload the system, all you have to do is land on relatively flat ground and it'll begin rapidly recharging things. Like that. And it took only about maybe 3 or 4 seconds for the fuel to recharge from that flight, so if that gives you an indication of how the usage to recharge speed. Let's see, what else should I show this video? What's my recording timer at? Next, for you lovers of logic, I'll show off Mark 14D12 Black Cat, because it has the most systems jammed into it out of any of the planes in here. So we have, if I pull it up in build mode to get the official listing, we have limited ammunition, limited fuel, we have variable angles for maneuverability, we have variable firepower speeds, we have the air brake, of course, we have an autopilot, which can maintain straight forward flight, left flight, or right flight, and also we can send coordinates onto public channels for tracking purposes. And on top of all of that, it's a very well-rounded functional airplane. If I... Oh, this builder. Anyways, it has a pretty significant amount of armor. From the top, we've got double layer of armor panels. We've got the outer layer, of course, but then underneath the block skin, we've got another one right up against the thrusters. It's not, because of complexity reasons, it's not made of complete 1x2s, so it's a little weaker than the earlier D10. Or no, D9. D9 is the really strong one. But yeah, it's got the extra bells and whistles over the earlier versions. So these ones actually get weaker down the tech tree in terms of combat functionality. They just get fancier. So we've got, let me get in the sticky camera so I can stay back here a little bit easier. The colored light you see in the back now is the variable angle. So this pinkish purple is maximum, and then as I drop it back down, you can see it slowly moves where our maximum angle is. I'm keeping the left stick held down for maximum pitch, and then it's accordingly moving the things. And the same thing for yaw, roll, etc. On the Black Cat, pitch and roll will run through the same set of servos as well, so it's very wiggly, but still quite effective. Then those blue lights that you see on the back, as well as up by the cockpit, are firing mode. We have 3 different ones, because we've got the total of 6 smart cannons, but it starts off with only 2 of them active. And then every time you press right on the D-pad, it cycles through. It's a multi-stage toggle. It resets to stage 1 after you click through stage 3. It's just a one button system. Whereas the variable mode is up and down in the D-pad. Well, down and up because I have it inverted, but you can change that when you receive the plane if you want. And what else to say about this one? Oh right, the autopilot. So in order to engage the autopilot on this model, you first hold the air brake open, then press up on the D-pad to activate straightforward mode, which it'll bob and weave a little bit. But, oh, I skipped past it. Here we are. Where's my altimeter? Do I not have an altimeter? Okay, no, this is the full logic version. I didn't fit the altimeter in the cockpit yet. So the altimeter is on the butt. A little harder to see. But we are... In forward flight, we are only gaining or losing... Yeah, I think we're gaining a couple of meters per second, but then because we're bobbing and weaving, it's really hard to tell if we're having a net gain or loss. And then, oh, I didn't do it in time and hit the wall. Dang it, I was babbling too long. Okay, let's try that again. So straightforward mode, and then once you're in straightforward mode, pressing right or left on the D-pad will initiate a right-hand or left-hand turning pattern. So you might be able to see the when we were in the straightforward mode, the blinking lights were both purple, and now the blinking lights have a white one on the side that's currently active. It's mostly for just display and testing purposes. It, well, I say it shouldn't jam up if you ever switch rapidly between right and left autopilots. It should always cancel the current one and then do the one that you're attempting to select. Although in order to switch back to forward, you do have to simply deselect the current turn. And then to get back out of a course, you just press the air brake and then press up on the, or hold the air brake and press up on the D-pad again. Now while I've got it out here, I can show the variable nature of its maneuverability. Right now we've got it in its lowest setting, and even that has pretty good pitch authority, but nice controllable roll, and non-overbearing yaw, because that's on R1 and L1. It doesn't have the variable inputs. It's nice to be able to have that toned down sometimes. So let's bring it up to, let's say, teal, like a robin's egg color, somewhere in the 50 to 60% range. Now it begins to behave more like it has gyros. Fun fact, the original reason I started banning gyros is because people kept accusing me of using them, and I was offended at that nature. I do not need training rails. And then, let's crank it up all the way to purple stage, which I normally only have to use against the really most dangerously agile of builds, or once I'm damaged and missing controls that I have to compensate for. Because its response is exceedingly snappy, and if there's any amount of input lag, it'll easily throw itself around and become unstable, because you can do things like this and just not be able to recover in time because you've well, if I was in first person or camera 8, I might have been able to recover, but I was just spinning too fast to align my controls with the motion of the plane. Anyways, we're getting too much into the usage of these planes and less about the Airforce itself, aren't I? What else should I say about the Airforce? We've gone over the regulations and limitations, how to earn planes. Yeah, anything else I'll probably have to put on screen through text as we're going along here. So to close of the video, I'll show the shiny toy of the tech tree, the Mark 13 M26B, which has the blades, and it has autopilot with an RC tracking, not RC tracking missile, RC guided missile. So, pardon me, I burped. I'm going to turn off the blades right away because I learned through experience it's a little hazardous to launch the missile with them active. Cough, cough. But with the autopilot system on this one, you can choose to either initiate a left-hand turn without launching the missile, or when you launch the missile, it'll immediately turn in the right-hand turning pattern, which after you launch the missile can be turned on and off and reused, of course, but in order to launch the missile, you only have the option of turning right. And unfortunately, these are still using the early autopilot, so if you have one side active and activate the other, it'll do weird things and jam up. Now, a little tip that you might want to remember for once you've earned your own, you want to be pulling up a little bit when you launch the missile from the M series, just because that landing gear likes to catch in the back sometimes. Blame the weld groups for making me fit it in like that. But as soon as you launch, the aerodynamic control fins pop open into a nice X, and the missile also uses thrust vectoring. No gyros, although it is the reason why gyro stabilizers are allowed. The further upgrades to the missile that I'm working on will use either aerodynamics or thrust vectoring for the roll control, but right now it's just using the lazy method, which also saves some complexity. But as you can see, it's capable of catching up to its own launch vehicle, which is great for practicing. But it's also ideal because then you can use yourself as bait. As people chase your name tag attached to the main vehicle, you can come up behind them in the missile, and because it's holding a very stable, steady pattern, they begin to fall into a stable, predictable pattern, which is easier for you to hit with the said missile. However, I am exceedingly bad at speaking and flying at the same time, so I am not demonstrating this well. Let's focus up. Missed that one. That's okay. Try to match altitude first. Do a little bit of height. I'm glad I didn't manually blow. That would have been too far. Right about here. There we go. See, like 100 meters out, I could feel that I had that lined up right. And yeah, I blew off way too much of it to recover there. But the NCAs can deal with a fair amount of damage to the airframe and still keep on moving. The weakest points on this, and pretty much any of my other planes, are the control surfaces, particularly the canards. They're responsible for, even including the thrust vectoring, I would say they're responsible for upwards of 1/3 to 40% of the maneuvering force. So when one of these gets shot off, your pitch control becomes very imbalanced. If you lose both of them, your pitch control drops off to a very sluggish pace. The rear control surfaces aren't quite as worrisome because they also have the thrust vectoring on them that has to get knocked off, but they're also still a little bit sensitive to damage. And of course the wings on these are never armored because if you cover up the wing surfaces, it kills the lift factor. So like a real plane, the wings can get ripped off pretty easily. But the armored versions protect the fuselage very well, which is good because the auto-aim tends to hit center of mass. Yeah, crap, I coughed in a place that I can't cut out. Oh well, it's towards the end of the video. No one listens this long. If you did listen this long, please comment. It would make me very happy. But I do think I'm going to close out the video here. If you've got comments and questions, leave them in the comments, and I'll do my best to answer them, especially if they're actually about these planes or Airforce. I do have separate tutorials for a number of things, and I plan to release more. If you have any ideas for tutorials, drop them in there too. Why not? It'll make the algorithm happy to have more comments. Like and subscribe, all that good stuff. And I'll see you on PlayStation. Bye-bye now. The servers are typically going to be called Fenrir's Airforce, and then a brief description after that that'll vary as I get better at deciding things. But it'll always have Fenrir's Airforce in it if it's one of the servers where you can come and earn the jets. Alright, I think that about does it. Anything else I should have had on screen as we were going along? There's plenty of places for that. Okay. Bye-bye now.